we only know what we know, and what we don't know, we don't know. And so you can't, you need to know that you're not alone, that if you're struggling with something, if you're seeing a change in the demographics, if you're coming across something that's new, challenges with the youth, you can reach out. We've mentioned research that's out there. We've got these sources that you can go and find and reach out and get that information to be a part of that. Is it this way? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about monitoring, and if you attended the new grantee session, or if you were on the webinar that we had, there was many slides that talked about the nuances of what and why we do. I'm just going to kind of go over the highlights from this past year in our monitoring process. And the slide that's up is just kind of our raw data of the number of grantees that we have in each of the programs and the total number of RHY funded programs that we funded this past year. And our mission is to support you all, the organizations and the communities that you're working in, right, to ensure that the youth that we're seeing that are coming into through your doors are getting the best services. That's our purpose. We want to ensure that each and every day that you're out there on the street, you're making a difference, you're making an impact, and we're moving towards that future where every single kid, child, young adult, and family has the opportunity to live a positive, productive, and violent-free life, right? That's what we want. And so that's what we're here for. RHYTech's mission as our technical assistance process is really there to ensure that you have those resources, that you have access to that you're trained, that you're, whatever needs you have in programmatic or organizationals to stand up your program or to make sure that you're meeting all the requirements. That's what they're there for. And it's just a comfort to know that you have that you're there for that process. So I'm going to talk a bit of some trends and themes that we've seen over this past year. And one of them for the organization is really that strong ethos, the mission, right? I kind of just spoke about FISBE's mission, and you know what your mission is about. And one of the things that's been really neat as I've traveled around and as we've traveled around and talked with you, the executive directors and the street workers, the youth care folks in the basic center or the case managers, is where organizations have that throughout, right? It's seamless. It permeates from every staff. When you talk with them, when you observe, when you look, I mean, it comes from the top all the way through. Everybody is bought in and sold on working and helping with these kids, right? And you know the hours that you spend, you know how much time and effort is put in that nobody, really pays attention to, the time that you've done that. That's never, we don't have a data point in RHYMIS to put that in, right? And so it's that type of thing that when we talk and when we engage with you all, I've just been really impressed, and the staff has as well, on some of the organizations that have really just had a solid cultural working environment that are all focused on this one purpose. The broad linkages is another one. We've got several workshops that are talking about community engagement or linkages and things like that. It's just not reaching across and connecting with your continuum of care. It's not being a part of maybe a city, coalition or things like that. But it's really broadening out, and you heard William talk about co-laborers. It's really looking across and seeing who else is, has kids that's a part of the population that they're serving or working with, that you can engage with and utilize their resources and join together. Programmatically, it's technology and social media or social forms of communication. We've seen that where some have the ability to kind of post where the street outreach team is going to be, tonight, or what's going on maybe at the drop-in center, and then also on a programmatic side of files, keeping all of that seamless. So a lot of neat things like that, and the intentional and purposefulness of it. It's critical, right, that we're intentional in the work that we're doing. Thinking back to Dr. Frank's presentation on that neuroscience of smiling and engaging, and I'm going to talk faster now. Okay. I wax poetically because I love this work and I want to make sure we get it. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly. Some of the challenges that we've seen that across the board, personnel with turnover, competitive wages, the funding, it requires we only have a little small piece of the pie here. It's very expensive to run emergency shelters, to have staff, all the background administrative support that you have. So as an organization, you have to go after other funding sources, other resources to ensure that that's happening. But then there's challenges because each pot of money requires different types of reporting. Programmatically, it's the intake, the case management, and the documentation. Documentation is really the key. That's the biggest struggle, is making sure that what you're doing is being documented, who you're serving is being documented accurately and reported, and the work that you're doing so that you can progress through that. And then aftercare, the aftercare process of really that full timeline of when they enter, when they're there, and when they leave, right? Case plan, exit plan, aftercare plan to ensure that permanency, self-sufficiency goal is occurring. Some innovations that we've seen, again, I talked a little bit about the broadness of the linkages, but leveraging community resources. I don't know if we've got anybody here from Cleveland, but I went to Cleveland not too long ago, and they have a fantastic county and community. It's very vibrant, foundational process. I know that there's other cities that we've been to as well that have that. So really leveraging that piece. I talked about going over to co-laborers, but don't stop there. Go where others are large corporations, finding unique and innovative ways to provide for the resources that can really nickel and dime an agency away. Training and job certification partnerships is huge. Many of the organizations, you being one of them here, probably in the room, have established some really solid partnerships with training and technical colleges for really high demand jobs, or it's something that you can really wrap that around within your program. Programmatically, all-inclusive systems of care, mentoring, either peer-to-peer, having your advisory board type of process, having volunteers, individuals, and then the group dynamics as well. All right, now it's time to put us on the hot seat. No. We'll take a couple questions about anything that we've talked about, or I don't know. Not something.
Darryl Cribb from Maryland. I just question, once a youth comes into your PCP in 21 days, and that's the money for the PCP, but you have unrestricted money, do you then take that youth, if the youth is going to stay another week or so, because we setting them up with services and it takes an extra week to set them up with services after they've been in our program for 21 days, do we take them out after 21 days out of the HMIS and then plug them back in because we're using unrestricted funding from another source? how do we usually, how do you do that?
So could you just say, I think you said your name and you're from?
The great state of Maryland.
All right. So I will take that question. So for the Basic Center program, yes, your youth can stay for up to 21 days with RHY funding, and then you switch them to a different funding stream. However, you do not exit them out of HMIS. You keep them in RHY HMIS until they actually exit your Basic Center program. We know that once a youth goes beyond 21 days, we know that we can limit and look at Basic Center program youth up to 21 days. But then we also get the opportunity to look at the duration or the length of a stay that a youth has in a Basic Center program. So again, to reiterate, we do not exit them out of RHY HMIS until they actually leave your Basic Center program. So good question.
We're over here. TC's got your phone.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jay Somers. I'm with the Florida Keys Children's Shelter. I have a similar question. Once a youth leaves the emergency shelter, I believe it was Chris earlier that said that is considered aftercare. No services can be considered prevention. So for the sake of HMIS entries, we had been, if they were continuing to work in aftercare with our prevention counselors or SINSFINS program, we were considering that prevention for the sake of data entry. So if they are no longer in the emergency shelter category and they're no longer in the prevention category, how does FISB expect us to account for the aftercare work we do?
Okay, so I'll take that as well. So your system should be set up that once a youth exits your shelter, that your RHY HMIS program should be set up for aftercare. And so you should be capturing that information in the aftercare component of RHY HMIS. And if your program is not set up to capture that, then please work with your HMIS lead to ensure that your program is capturing aftercare services. And there's now a requirement of a minimum of, is it 3 months of providing aftercare services? So that's the minimum. You can provide aftercare services beyond the 3 months, but we're not, based on our regulations, we now require 3 months of aftercare services.
Over here.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Sanders. I'm from Michigan with Common Ground. This question I heard you identify under challenges in regards to turnover and competitive wages. So from a federal level, now that we've identified that as a challenge, is there a particular plan or goal to help us, reduce turnover and be competitive? Because we do lose, the reality is we do lose good workers because of money. So is there a particular plan or goal to address that concern?
No. That's the short answer. The broader answer is also no. Not us federally. I bring that up because, it is a common thing that kept coming up. We've got grantees here that have, in my opinion, have pretty much figured that piece out on retention piece. A best practice. And so I don't know how we'll kind of do that process, but you're in my region, so we can talk. I can pass it on to Jessica as well to get that. But, and those in the room that are doing it and saw the gentleman, please, again, connect. But that's one process of doing it, like I said, on how to strengthen the hiring process and the recruitment process. And then it's the piece about what we've talked about as far as that leveraging and co-laborers. So we know our monies only go so far, and that's gonna, take an act of of someone much higher above in the sky, probably to make that change, right? And so we can't really wait around for that because we've got to serve the kids now. So what we're focused on, what we're working towards, is really broadening out the process of, leveraging that, going where others are serving those same types of populations or are providing that service that the kids need, but it would cost you too much money to do, and joining forces in that. Using those kinds of leverages to be able to stretch the dollar rather than, trying to wait for more dollars to fall out of the sky.
And so one of the strategies we can implement at the federal level is utilize RHYTAC. I know that we have a lot of grantees that have identified best practices in terms of working to recruit and retain staff. And so it's developing, maybe it's a toolkit or a different resource that we can share with other grantees who are experiencing those challenges, and to be able to share those best practices, strategies, whether it's via fact sheet, e-learning module, a toolkit. But those are some of the things that we can strategize in terms of making sure we're providing you with the training and technical assistance as it relates to staff recruitment and retention.
We'll do 2 quick questions, and then I know that we're going to go into the regional federal sessions after this. So we'll do one over there and one over here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Troy Sides. I'm out of Grand Junction, Colorado. I work for an organization called The House, a safe place for Western Slope teens. My question has to do with the last question, question number 5 of Mr. Holloway's talk. So let's say you have an 18-year-old youth in custody who, either from a cellmate or because I visited him in jail because I know his public defender and they connected the two of us, hears about our BCP and thinks to himself, that's great, I want to do it, I'm all in, and he's ready to go, therefore checking the voluntary box. Can then the court or the judge or the PO make it a condition of his bond or probation to place him into the BCP? And, just to complicate things more, does the answer to that change depending on whether he's a minor or 18 or older, if that makes sense?
To parrot my esteemed colleague, no. No, a system kid has to be either a runaway or a homeless youth in order to be eligible to go into a basic center program. And the court cannot make it a condition of release that they go into an emergency shelter.
Even if he's homeless outside jail?
But at that point, it's the responsibility of that system to find an appropriate placement. If the system abdicates that responsibility, if the kid is walked out the doors of the juvenile detention center and there's nobody there to take them, then they are homeless. But I would hope that we don't have systems, particularly juvenile justice systems, that are going to open up the Sallyport gate. There you go. It's like Shawshank Redemption. You're free to go after, however many months of incarceration. There needs to be a plan in place. Now, if that young person runs away from that plan, whether it's home detention or an alternative placement like a group home, then they're a runaway. But there can't be a condition in the placement order by the court or by the probation officer that says you can go to this emergency shelter. If the facility operates juvenile justice beds, meaning they have a contract with the county or the state, that's fine, but it can't be RHY dollars. And that's really the distinction that we're trying to draw, is where's the funding coming from? It could be ACME shelter program. An ACME shelter program has beds set aside for RHY, has beds set aside for juvenile justice. As long as it's being funded through those juvenile justice funds, you can go to that program.
So what if it's an 18-year-old or older who isn't in the juvenile system anymore? That's primarily where we run into this
Well,
issue.
at that point, then, the only program that they would be eligible to go into is a transitional living program. And yes, if at that point they walk out the door of the jail and they have nowhere to go, there is no condition of placement other than you have to figure out how to check in with your PO on a monthly or quarterly basis, but they don't have a home, they don't have a safe alternative, then they would be eligible to go into a transitional living program because they are homeless based on the definition of homelessness.
Last question.
Hi, my name is Esther No. I'm program manager of a BCP in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I had the pleasure to attend the regional grantee meeting in Atlanta. And we actually talked through, to my understanding, the scenario that was brought up a little bit ago where a youth transitions funding during their stay. And during that meeting, it was to my understanding that we were told that you're actually supposed to exit them into HMIS, put that they're being discharged to like a shelter, and then we actually need to completely redo a different chart because you guys should only be looking at their RHY stay because of confidentiality. So please clarify for that for me, because when I was at that grantee meeting, we changed our policies based on what was said that day. So what you just said to a little bit ago kind of contradicted that.
So I'm assuming you're talking about the BCP and in terms of, so I will reiterate and clarify that for Basic Center program, that the youth is entered once they have a first night of shelter stay, will be entered into the emergency shelter, and we do not exit them until they leave the Basic Center program. And then they're placed, and then you can start entering the aftercare component for that particular young person. And the reason we do that is because we want to look at the duration of the young person's stay in a Basic Center program. And we do know that, for example, if a young person has been in a Basic Center program for 45 days, we know on our end that our maximum stay is 21. So we can actually tease out the data to show specifically with our funding that a youth has stayed for 21 days and then look at the average length of stay based on truncating it to 21 days. But we also want to look at the average length of stay for Basic Center overall. When you say a chart, I'm not sure I'm following you in terms of charts.
I think she means that when she was at the Atlanta meeting, they said they needed to discharge them not only from HMIS, but then they had to open a whole new chart. So there was one chart that's a BCP chart, and then there would be another chart that's...
So I think that's a programmatic level decision that you can make in terms of transitioning that young person from RHY funding to a separate funding. So some people I know will have a chart where they have a divider, and this is where they are with RHY funding, and then after that divider within the same chart, and some people may choose to have a separate chart, but that's a programmatic level decision that you guys need to make. And so with that, I know we're way over time, and it's time for us to meet with your federal project officers, and so we're looking forward to answering more of the questions you may have at your Meet Your Federal Project Officer session. So thank you for your time and your good questions.
I'm going to go to all three because all of mine are